Alright, we are recording for Going Medieval. Use provided by Tinsley PR. Yeah, some stuff to talk about from this past week. Not as much as you may think after Computex, but yeah, that's how it worked out. Which is also why AMD's the only... So, normally you would expect me to try to do a news item for AMD, one for Intel, one for NVIDIA. I end up merging Intel and NVIDIA together and also threw in some Noctua stuff because I'd seen the phase change cooler. I call it that. Other people call it thermosiphon, whatever. I'd seen that teased actually last week by Noctua. I was definitely interested in that. I want to talk about that. But Intel and NVIDIA were basically only showing off AI stuff that was not consumer targeting, so I merged it together because like this stuff isn't going to matter that much for the OCC audience. At least I don't think so. I mean, it might be interesting, but these aren't products you're going to be buying. Whereas AMD announced the Threadripper 9000 series, including non-pro, which means HEDT, which I'm definitely looking forward to because that's what I would want to upgrade to. Well, not upgrade to, but build a new desktop around. Eventually, it's not going to happen for a while. They also announced the RX 9060 XT. It's only the XT, but there are two versions. There's an 8 gig and a 16 gig. As I recall, the 8 gig is $300. The 16 gig is $350. At least that's the suggested price. We'll see if it stays at that. And I think I had seen actually with that it's NVIDIA's in a very bad place at the moment. That I think some early reviews from the 90s, no, maybe it was the 5060 because the RX 5060 is out. But it is not performing where NVIDIA would need to be competitive with AMD at the moment. I really never cover that over. When true, it doesn't really matter, but now I'm thinking, should I? Anyhow, so yeah, it seems like the 9060 might be in a good place. And it is, I will grant, some people are like, oh, 8 gig isn't enough. Okay, for one thing, you're wrong. For another thing, no, I mean, it's, you need to remember that the majority of games that have been created, 8 gig is fine. They don't have enough assets that would push it to past 8 gig. But I'm also counting new games and such that still look fantastic, but are like 10 years old. Which reminds me, apparently The Witcher 3 is 10 years old. That, even if, well, I could believe that with their next-gen version, next-gen update, with ray tracing on, and if you do put, well, the textures actually shouldn't be pushing it up that high. I could believe that would be over 8 gig, largely because of the ray tracing data. But that's where it's 16 gig. But for most users, 8 gig is probably going to be fine. I mean, it's one of those things that's actually kind of sad is true that we are having to have some stuff overbuilt because we're not seeing optimization like we used to. Sure, do that. I mean, it's like, I know I keep going back to it, but if you look at the actual visuals and performance of Just Cause 3 and its specifications, its requirements, and then you can compare that to some modern games, it's like, do the modern games look better? Yeah, some of them do, but it's a marginal improvement for a heavy increase on requirements. I mean, it's, unfortunately, the situation is, a lot of modern games are not, are just not well optimized, including optimized so that they're not taking up copious amounts of memory, video memory or otherwise. Okay. Alright, it's gonna be spring soon. And then AMD also showed off what they're calling FSR Redstone, which I find a little odd being called Redstone, but in any case, it is 3 technologies coming. ray regeneration, machine learning, frame generation, and crap, I'm trying to remember what the other one was. I don't think I made a note on it. In my notes, I'd have to actually pull up what I wrote. It was some sort of neural caching, specifically for the demo they were using was talking about ray tracing, and that basically you would do this to shortcut to predict whether or not a ray for path tracing would be relevant or not, so that it would reduce the noise of the final image. I do not know where even the 5090 or whatever it is. I mean, I don't think NVIDIA's put out like a 5090 Ti, 5090 Super, or Titan or anything like that yet. But we're probably still at best maybe a dozen, I would guess. I'm not sure. But at best a dozen rays per pixel, which produces a very noisy image. So NVIDIA, AMD, Intel, they're all having to do denoising to create an image like what we can see here. Rasterization that isn't as necessary. In order to get to photorealism, you need to be at hundreds, like 500 rays per pixel, which is part of the reason why they have to do upscaling with FSR, XeSS, and DLSS, because there's no way with ray tracing to have that be real time and have anywhere near a good image. So they have to do that. They also have to do a lot of denoising, which the image will be very incorrect without that denoising. You turn it on, then it's basically reconstructing the image anyway. So what this neural thing was, it's part of Redstone, is to reduce the need. Well, I'm trying to remember how to put it, but it was basically caching stuff from. It was looking at nearby pixels. It was looking at prior frames to figure stuff out, so that it I guess technically it would be still a denoiser to a degree, but it's doing it with more data around it, around the pixel you're looking at. So it can improve image quality and potentially reduce costs. But I don't know, we'll see. I think they said that they were aiming that for being the end of the year, or being out by the end of the year. I don't quite remember. But it's also true that at least the ray regeneration stuff, maybe also the neural caching. Yeah, DLSS 3.5 has some of that. At least AMD, hopefully, with this is not going to be stupid like NVIDIA, where DLSS 3 is not supported on like the RTX 20 series, but 3.5 is. They really screwed up when they did that. Because it is that ray regeneration is something that like the RTX 20 series, so the 2080 I have sitting on the test system at home, is capable of that. But the multi-frame generation of DLSS 3, it's not. But it's technically a lower number, a lower generation number. Yeah, it's yeah. Yeah, so going back a bit, I did mention the Threadripper HEDT, which that's awesome. They announced 9 Threadripper 9000 series CPUs. 6 of those are Pro series, or WX. 3 were HEDT, so not Pro. I don't remember the numbers. It was probably something like the 9960, 9970, 9980, but I don't quite remember. But they are 24 core, 32 core, and then 64 core. The only call pricing being mentioned. You know, this should actually be turned to slush, shouldn't it? If it were raining on top of snow. Anyway, so it has that. Have those versions, which one thing, they all had the same peak boost. The base clock did vary, and that's actually one thing that I was kind of glad to see as far as, because it was 24 core had the highest base clock, 64 core lowest, and 32 was in the middle. There have been prior generations of Threadripper where actually, even though you had like 16 and 24 core, the 32 core would have a higher base clock than the others, because I'm assuming either they were using better quality chiplets, just because they needed more of the cores to be active in there, or just whatever the configuration was, it allowed, internal configuration allowed them, the 32 core, to have a higher base clock. I need to start manipulating this. That can stay up, but let's do that. Yeah, actually, yeah, let's do that. Can turn down research. Mining can wait. So that's nice for me to see, because I've said before, you know, I'm very happy with my 1950X, which is 16 cores. I'm very happy with it. If I were to... Did that really clear the... Alright, I guess snow doesn't mean anything. If I were to... Well, upgrade. Well, do a new build, and I do intend to at some point. Just haven't had the need to yet. Or the will to. 24 cores would probably be all I'd need. I'd probably be happy with just that. There we go. So the fact that that does also have the highest base clock is encouraging, because whenever I get around to a new desktop, I will want it to be competent for gaming. Not that the 1950X isn't competent for gaming. It is. Plenty of games. I played them and was recording them at the same time. That's awesome. Right? That's very powerful. But a higher base clock is like, okay, then that should be better off for that. And I think all of their base clocks are higher than... No, I take that back. I think 64 core had a base clock of 3.2 gigahertz, which is not higher than the 1950X could boost up to 4 gigahertz, I believe. And its base clock was 3.2. I don't quite remember, but it still is. Like, it's amazing how Threadripper has evolved. There. Set it there for now. Yeah, so I'm definitely happy with that. All have 64 threads of PCIe. You get 5. Well, sorry, yeah, 64 lanes, I should say. Come on! Thank you for finally acknowledging I clicked the button. Yeah. I don't remember what the what it was saying for availability. I don't think it was that far away. There. There. Oh, come on. Yeah, so definitely neat to see that. It'd also be nice, because whatever the future desktop may be for me, even though it might be months to still more than a year away, at the time I'd be building that, when I built the current desktop, I had some money, but not a great deal. I still spent a good amount of money on it. Fortunately, stuff wasn't horribly expensive at the time. It was like the 1950X at $1,000 was pretty damn good. But still, it's like I'm probably going to go a little overboard with a future desktop. But maybe I'd go 32. There's no way I'd go to 64 cores. There's no way I'd need it. So I would not be able to justify that. But plenty of RAM, plenty of storage in there. Probably go a little overkill with the power supply. Not too much. Because I'm not going to be doing like a dual GPU thing, and I also would probably try to not go to NVIDIA and risk having when the stupid 12-volt connector thing blow up on me. I'm sorry, that is legitimately one of the dumbest designs they've ever done. It's like, hey, we're going to pass more power over these cables, and we're going to make them smaller, so they're actually more likely to melt. It's like, why would you do this? I mean, see, I know nobody at AMD would ever watch it, would ever be watching these videos or anything. But somebody at AMD should be, you know, why don't we go to PCI SIG and work with them on a 10 pin that is up from the 8 pin, but we're using the same gauge of wires as the 8 pin. And we're just, you know, changing things up a little bit for, you know, change the keying, obviously, but, you know, making it so that that can be 300 watts along the cable, maybe even 600 watts, so that, you know, it is directly competitive with the 12 volt, but have it be the same gauge, and make sure that it's just not designed stupid. I would do that. Like, if I were at AMD and we're in a position to do that, I would be like, let's do this, because legitimately, this design is stupid. At some point, we're probably going to want to move to, and honestly, 300 watts would be fine as well. We'd probably want to move towards this other design, you know, something more powerful than the 8 pins. But that thing is so stupidly designed. It is so recklessly designed. Let's just do this that expands on the current standard that has been so reliable for so long. Why don't we do that? Kind of wondering what it is that's actually... Okay. I wasn't sure if maybe the reflections are what's causing some of the stuttering there. But in any case, yeah, I would do that. But anyway, yeah, I'd want a power supply that would be capable of that, even if I would not be taking advantage of it. But it's also just nice, the idea, because I mean, I'm using 750 watt power supplies, which is enough for what I'm doing, but it's one of those, yeah, as power supplies get older, they're not necessarily going to be able to hit peak as much, so being able to push that peak out further so that you've got more headroom there, probably be good. I do believe I want to actually expand on this. Okay, so... 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9. Good. So I do remember I did want to do this, so it's 3, 4. And also opposite them. Door right at the edge. There. 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 Anything else? I feel like I might have been putting something up on the walls. I'm not seeing anything. Like a decorate. Oh, wait, no, right there. I think I may have only just thrown that down to have it somewhere. Okay. That's fine. And let me just expand this out. That, and then... There. There. Of course, that doesn't actually matter, the order, because they're just going to do it however they do it. That's also, well, leave it like that. Okay. So they will get to that eventually. Actually, they may get to it sooner than I want. Oh, well, some of them might. And we'll just see how some of it goes. Yeah. The one thing I will grant with going to Threadripper, it's like, it's more I don't want to downgrade, but it's also I'm not sure what all I will do with some of its capabilities. Like, for the current build, yes, I fully intend to take advantage of the PCIe lanes for additional storage to make this into a very nice server. Like, I already have a 20 terabyte. It's backing up some stuff from the server. So that'll go in there, and maybe I'd try to add some more in the future. So in that regard, I would need a PCIe to SATA adapter, which do exist. So yeah, I'd need to get to that at some point. I'd need to get something like that at some point, but yeah. Oh, and also potentially an upgraded power supply as well, but yeah, fun stuff. Fun stuff. Okay, hey. Let me check, because... maybe in here? This is a raw material. Do you allow any uses for ash? Because there are actually uses. Yeah, from enriching garden soils to pottery glazes and soap. And yet there is no way to enrich soil, there's no way to glaze pottery, and there is no soap in the game. And ash has been in here for quite a while. When are we gonna get those other things? I mean, okay, you know what? Soap makes sense to not have until there's sickness. When there's sickness in the game, then yes, have soap, because that's a way to combat it. But gardening is absolutely in the game, has been in this for quite a while. So that is completely reasonable to have essentially fertilized squares. So that should be a thing. Don't know if they will do that, but they should. They absolutely should. So that's already awesome. Awesome. All of these are actually full all the way down. I wasn't sure if it was gonna manage that or not. That's cool. That's so cool. And maybe when also they get to that, they will realize that saplings don't work the way they depict them. Like, not even close. Okay. I'm gonna leave... Yeah, they can stay at medium for a while. I do need to reduce those at some point, but make them work. There's still things to butcher. I know these things need to be done, but it's like... See, this is absolutely one of those. I just want to take cooking and put it over here. But there's no means of doing it. Ah. You know what would also be neat? It would be involved, though, is if they actually had a way for you to schedule holidays. Like to just, hey, it's spring. On this first day of spring, or third day of spring in this case, just always schedule that there's a feast. That would actually be really neat. And entirely appropriate to do. They haven't done it, and I doubt they will, but it would be neat for them to do that. About half an hour so far. I actually do kind of want this to be a shorter video. I've been making so many long videos for this and other things of late that, yeah, I kind of like the idea of keeping one short. I did mention a little bit the Noctua. Unfortunately, the thermosiphon thing, they were showing it off at Computex, but it's not, it's still in development. So no ETA in that. But they did also have an AIO that they're doing with an Acertec pump on there, which, you know, is not surprising. But they did a bunch of stuff apparently to make sure it's as quiet as possible, the pump. And that will be available in 240, 360, and 420mm configurations. And that's early next year, I think? I think that's right. They have entered into a partnership with Antec for one of Antec's cases to be fully loaded with Noctua fans, which that's neat. And honestly, that's something I don't necessarily need them pre-installed, but I mean, if it's something like that. But it would be nice to be able to just be like, yeah, and I want to buy the however many fans I need to fully kit out this case or that case. And I also remember thinking that with a company like Be Quiet that sells cases and sells fans, it's odd that there aren't like fan upgrade kits for those. There's just, yeah, the case normally comes with 2 or 3 fans, supports 7. You can just check this box off when you order from us, and we'll just include the other 7 for you and the controller, and you have it at a discount because, you know, the whole thing on one. But I don't know why they don't do that. And other places, well, does Antec have their own fans? I don't remember. Fractal Design, I think, does. Leon Lee does. I know that. But I don't know of any of them doing something like that. Corsair could also do that. It's obvious to do this. Why has no one done it yet? Look at all the stuff that needs to be hauled. You know what? As dangerous as this technically is. There. I'm doing this so that they can transition over to spring clothing. They're not going to, because they're idiots, but make it possible for them to do it on their own. I just want to make sure that all of those were set. Oh, Urgent Haul is actually... Alright, let's do that. I don't even know if there's enough space for all that, but I don't want it sitting out. You know, one thing that occurred to me while I was writing up, mainly from the NVIDIA stuff, because one of the things that they are doing is working on physical AI, which is basically AI, but trained, you know, that kind of stuff, for robots. You could, in theory, remake this game, be heavily inspired by this game, and have it be that you're trying to train robots for this. I mean, it just was one of those things that, yeah, you could do that today. It would be a viable design for a game, but do it correctly. We like have the idea of chores, which, I mean, let's face it, that's kind of the idea with having robot assistance in this physical AI, would not just be for an industry, which honestly shouldn't need much of the AI, but is for more general in the house kind of stuff. You wouldn't need it in industry because industries are so controlled of environments that you should be able to absolutely say, you know, it's like it move the arm here at this speed in this way, and it's like it's never going to come into an obstruction unless something else has gone horribly wrong. So it's like AI isn't necessary there. I'm just trying to think. I mean, I guess in theory, if you wanted to have robots doing garbage sorting, which, I mean, in some ways that is something that we could do better at, because, yeah, what was it that I saw? Somebody was talking about how, how sad it is how few people recycle, and that it annoys them whenever they see somebody not recycling, and it's like, what are you talking about? A lot of places, recycling, you put it in the can, it goes to the landfill, just like trash. I mean, legitimately, that is the case for so much of it. So you could try to come up with better ways of sorting. So, like, single stream, at least you're being honest about, yeah, well, it's all going to the same place. You just try to make sure that it's going to the single stream where recyclables are sorted out. So, like, in theory, you could do that. Currently, how single stream works is not just having humans watch, but they do with cameras watch, and they have jets of air that will fire to push things off of the one line onto others. So it's like, oh, that can be recycled, push it over there. Which is really neat. That is neat, that is clever. And that would require adaptation. But at the same time, let's wow, the beats are not full when they should be. But you'd need to come up with a good reason for that to be done. Because, I mean, it's also, I don't think you could try to argue that, oh, well, it'll be, if we have these robots doing it, it'll be cheaper. It's like, well, not actually. Because we already have systems for doing this. Making a robot, we already have technological systems for doing this. So making a robot that would do it is like, well, you're trying to have one technical system compete with another. The more advanced one isn't necessarily going to be any cheaper than the currently available. So, yeah. I mean, it's just one of those, sadly, that having that's more about just the will and the funding, but the will to do it. But it is also, to be fair, there's a lot of materials that are not practical to recycle, like plenty of electronics. How do you recycle a motherboard? You kind of can't. The way it's made, you've got all these different materials. The stuff that would be worth trying to extract is a low amount, so extracting it is very hard to make profitable. And also, plastics can't always be reused, or even recycled. Sometimes they can be, but even things like where they are like taking so-called ocean plastics and using them in new materials. In some cases, what they're doing is they're just shredding it up and throwing it into the mix. So it's actually offsetting. So the mass will be the same, but the amount of new plastic is reduced. And probably stuff around now. The total amount of plastic being used is reduced because of that offset. And I think in some cases it can be lighter, like is it the basilica? I can't remember now what it is. The building is hundreds of years old. It is the largest freestanding dome in the world, specifically in Rome. At least I think it's in Rome. I know it's in Italy. Part of the way that was achieved is on the inside there are cutouts in it. The dome gets thinner as you approach the top, but also, and this is something that the Romans were doing. This was built after the Romans, as I recall. But they would throw in ceramic jugs because it would displace the concrete and be lighter. And I think also sometimes the jugs would be sealed so that it's air pockets as well. Because you could do that without significantly decreasing the strength, but you are significantly reducing the mass. which means that even though you are losing some strength, you are also losing need for the strength. So that's kind of what they're doing with some of the plastic quote-unquote recycling. It's not actually recycling, it's just coming up with a new use. So it's not like the material has been broken down so they can be reused as something new. No, they're just applying it. And that's just part of how plastics are. Concrete is different. Concrete's different. Because that can actually be infinitely recycled. At least I know that has been stated once before. And I've seen it enough times, I think that's true, but it might not be completely. But that's just because to make concrete, you obviously need water. But you need cement and an aggregate and I think you need an aggregate in there as well, which can be like sand, but also gravel. When you have destroyed concrete, you can break that down, break it, like just smash it up, and you can then reuse that as the gravel, as the aggregate. But also, I think it is reusable as cement. I'm not certain on that. I need to check on that. But it is. I'm just like we do plenty of things that you can do that with, and also like metals, sort of. Glasses, sort of. For metals and glasses, it becomes a question of what impurities are in there, especially with metals. That's why I remember seeing something, I think it was a Modern Marvels, might not have been, where it was at a metal recycling center, and they have special devices that are basically, no, are they gas chromatographs? Or are they, crap, why can't I think of it? Anyway, it's something that they actually use a high-powered laser to burn a little bit of the metal off so they can analyze and figure out, okay, what alloy is this? And the thing is, and it's like the dude had a handheld one that's like, yeah, this can identify hundreds of alloys. But we got a bigger machine over there that's not handheld that can detect thousands. And what you don't realize, what you may not realize is that distinction actually saves some money. Because if they can say, yes, it is specifically this variant of alloy, then it's like, okay, we can now put that with others of that collect all that alloy together somewhere else, and that can be mixed together appropriately. Whereas if you are not able to distinguish between them, and you're mixing different alloys, what you get is not necessarily the alloy you will trust. Or you'd need to do something to purify one of the alloys, getting rid of the impurities that make it an alloy, and then have to start over, and that's a waste of time and energy. So that's why being able to identify it is so helpful. But as I was saying, with a lot of electronics, it's not the case, because you've got, like in a PCB, you've got fiberglass. Not sure how much silicon you have in there, but you definitely do have a lot of copper. But small amounts of copper sandwiched between a lot of fiberglass. I think those have to be shredded, and then you have to somehow separate out metal and the fiberglass. In theory, you could just burn it, and a lot of the fiberglass will burn away. The copper may, if you have the temperature high enough, drain out, but it's still going to be very impure. I mean, it's one of those things that electronic waste is a problem because it is so difficult to separate later to actually recycle. How exactly did I get on this topic? Oh yeah, that's right, with the robot stuff. So for that, that wouldn't help with recycling, but being able to better identify papers, glasses, some plastics, and metals, yeah, that could be helpful. That could be a worthwhile use. Also, with papers, being able to identify, is it dyes? Because I'm like, one thing here, where I live, even though I'm pretty sure our recycling, it just goes to the trash. It doesn't actually get processed for recycling. But if it is paper, which includes cardboard, that has oils and such on it from food, then no, that needs to be trashed. It's like, what? I was like, there would be ways to wash that out, but it's like, no, we're not even going to bother with that. Just put it in the trash. So like a pizza box, like a pizza delivery box kind of thing, that has to be trashed. But something else that might have a whole bunch of dyes and such on because something was printed on there, no, that can be recycled. I'm not sure what the distinction, because there might be a legitimate chemical distinction between them, but still is the whole. Um, there are these seemingly arbitrary decisions. So helping with sorting between that, or just being like, yeah, we can. That's not so bad. That can go through, or that is kind of bad, but we can wash that in. That kind of distinction that could be helpful, but it's still. Yeah, I do wonder where this physical AI would be useful in industry, because I do have doubts. I do have doubts about that. All right. That has been enough of my blathering. So, yeah, see you next time.